A flexible approach. So how we tackle this using translation tools in a translation environment. Before I start, I just wanted to apologise for not being there in person. I really wanted to come to UTIC 2016. I've only been to Ukraine once before. That was to Kiev many years ago, and I was really looking forward to the opportunity to sing a little bit more of it, and of course to mingling and speaking to all of you translators. I find it very hard to give a presentation when I'm just talking to my laptop. I'm much better when I can react with people face to face. So hopefully it won't be too boring for you, and that you will be able to follow along. So we'll start off by taking a look at this quotation from Henry Ford. Quality means doing it right when no one is looking. Now, I really like this quotation. We have quite a long history on the topic of quality, and Henry Ford made this statement. It really hit the nail on the head, because it's important to have processes in place to ensure that the quality expectations of a customer are being met. Ultimately, it's all about customer satisfaction. If the customer's not happy about the quality of the product they get, they're not going to come back. So in our case, it's all about when you're doing a translation job, when you're doing a reviewing job of a document, it's all about making sure that the end quality is good, so that you avoid any negative feedback from your customer. So I want to show a brief slide defining quality assurance at a high level. So in layman's terms, quality assurance is a guarantee that a product or service offered by a company meets the accepted quality standards that were agreed upon. And this includes a consensus on what quality means and the ways in which it should be measured to ensure conformance. It can be seen as a process to prevent mistakes or defects in the product or a service before it's delivered. So trying to ensure that mistakes are gone before you even review the review stage. So I really like the summary in this slide, where we say that a product needs to be fit for purpose, and that it needs to be right first time. The second point, right first time, is particularly important because in Studio we've always tried to provide mechanisms to ensure that translation errors are found as early in the process as possible. And this means that downstream, when you get to the review stage, many of the mistakes should already have been eliminated. And this means that less issues will be reported by the reviewer, making for a smooth process overall. So it's very important to keep the topic of quality in mind when you're doing a translation work. It's not just a topic for review. We should also make a distinction between the term quality assurance and the term quality control. You might be aware of the quality verification checks we have and all the other checks like spell checking, grammar checking, terminology verification, etc. And these are what we refer to as quality control. So later on, when we move downstream into the review stage and we start moving into quality assurance, then all of these things together become the translation quality assurance that we have within Studio. So quality from a very long time has been the topic of standardization. You can see quite a few standards that have been updated over the years and deal with the topic of quality. They try to put a process around the standard so that you can adhere to a particular quality just by following that process. So you get generic standards as well as translation specific ones. So there's some examples here. ISO 9001 is a more generic standard. The other two here are more focused around the translation and review process. The whole point is that the end result of following the process in these standards is going to ensure that you meet the expectations of a customer who's trying to adhere to this particular standard. So we have another quotation just to lighten up our day. Quality that the end user will see. That is the best kind of advertising. So if the end customer has a quality product in front of them, then that is the best kind of advertising. The more they see this quality, the more they will trust the service provider who delivered the translation. So I think there are probably some psychological effects being delivered here as well. The more reliable a process you have that is leading to that quality, the more trust you will build between the work giver and the work doer. And at the end of the day, the customer will always come back to you because they know they can trust you to deliver the quantity they want, the quality they want. So it's very important to remember at the back of your mind why you're delivering the quality, and don't just do it in order to fulfill the requirements of a particular process. So let's take a look at quality assurance in the classic translation workflow. Typically, you'll carry out your quality checks while you're working in the translation stage. So we have automated checks, and hopefully many of these will prevent errors from even happening in the first place. Obviously, you could carry out a review within this stage, so you might send the document to a colleague to review the translation that you've already done. But once all of that's finished, you typically move it over into the revision phase, and in there we start to address the topic of today's presentation, which is more about translation quality assessment. You can carry out your defect tracking and correction work in the review stage, and typically it will be carried out by subject matter experts. It's quite important to distinguish between the translator review document and the subject matter expert review, because by the time you get to this second stage in revision where you have subject matter experts looking at the document, at this stage you really don't want to be picking up too many translation errors. And then after this we'd have the final review of the proofreading, with proofreading, some DTP changes, and then eventually prepare for the final delivery for your clients so they can carry out their review. It's probably worth mentioning in this final step we also have a retrofit feature in Studio which helps for carrying out a light editing on the final document by the client, for example, and then you can bring those changes back into your translation to update your translation memories. It's not really a topic for today, but it is worth noting because all of this does demonstrate how they come together to provide a complete quality assurance capability within the product. It's an interesting slide here with a quote from Mark Twain, really discussing why all translations are not equal. I can't actually speak Italian, but this slide was provided by a colleague, and it's quite interesting to see how machine translation can fail, particularly with idiomatic expressions. You could then have a more literal translation, which will probably give you a bit of a gist of what the translation meant, but again, it's not really perfect. And finally, you'd have a translation by a subject matter expert, and at that point, we're looking at something which is really a good quality translation. So what is important when you look at the entire topic of quality assurance? There's quite a lot of different aspects that are important to keep in mind as you go through your translation project. And when it comes to ensuring quality, a lot of different techniques are used. Source and target could be compared. You might do some kind of translation sampling, especially if it was a very big project. You might want to take the sample of a project so you could extrapolate from there to see what the overall quality was. You are running quality checks, and we're using technology because you're using a CAD tool, and all of these have to be cost effective. Clearly you don't want to exceed the budget you have in place for the project in the first place, not at the cost of quality. So when you look at translation quality, I think domain experience and really understanding what it is that you're translating is the most important thing. But overall, it's very good to have all of these other steps in place to ensure that the translation quality can be met. So we'll just take a quick look at this report from the Common Sense Advisory. It's quite interesting to look at how industry experts or other industry experts would look at translation quality. So in this report from November 2015, you can see they focus on three aspects. Holistic quality, and this is a very general overview rating, where the reviewer might take a look at the translation and just give an overall assessment on what they think about the usefulness and the quality of the translation. Obviously this is quite non-committal, but if the translation is rejected, then it might be interesting to go deeper and look at some of the other reasons or the other methods for measuring quality, such as analytic quality. Now, analytic quality is sort of what we're talking about today. The basic idea is you treat the translation as if it was perfect, and then you carry on analysing it, trying to identify specific problems. It should be a more analytical approach so that you're providing objective reasons for a translation failing rather than subjective reasons, which you might have achieved if you were only using the holistic approach. And the final approach is automatic quality. And this is really a method for finding things such as you forgot to put a full stop at the end of a sentence when there was a full stop at the end of the source sentence. So it's very easy to have an automatic check that can find a problem like that and report it. So really, TQA, or Translation Quality Assessment, is all about trying to get away from the very subjective nature of quality assessment. So when a customer comes back and complains, but is not able to point out specific issues with the translation, then you have to have this very subjective exchange between a work giver and a work doer, where the work giver is not able to elaborate on why the translation doesn't meet his quality expectations. The work doer is then put in a very defensive position because they have to say, well, tell me why, or give me more information. And this is what TQA is all about, and it's what we're talking about today. TQA should allow the work giver to give you very structured feedback on why the translation didn't meet the quality that they were expecting. So before we take a look at TQA, let's take a quick look at the automated checks that are part of Studio. So you can see here quite a rich list of mechanisms for carrying out quality control that we put into the product over the years. Now all of these things are features that are put into the tool to try to catch errors and report on them before they actually happen in the TQA process, or before they're picked up in the TQA process. So if you remember, we spoke about being right first time in an earlier slide. Well, that's really what the quality control is all about. It's about trying to make sure that the translator is able to carry out the work in a way that meets the expectations of the end customer the first time without having to go over it again and again and again. So you can see the errors early on in the process, and then you won't have to report on them later when you do the actual TQA reporting. So it does make a lot of sense to put some time into configuring QA checks as much as possible. I think it's particularly important where a project manager is involved, because he or she is going to be aware of the quality expectations of the customer, but the translator won't be. They're going to be removed from that. So if the project manager puts a good set of quality checks into the project at the start, so the translator hasn't even got to worry about them, then they can make sure that the translator is able to work with the project manager to achieve the right quality expectations first time. So we have another interesting quotation here. It's a really important point when you're considering quality. If you spend an extra day refining the translation to ensure what you think is a quality translation, but your client would really have been happy with the translation as it was the day before, then you've not added to the quality for your customer at all, but you have been late. So establishing what quality means to each customer is very important, so you can determine the rules for providing the quality required for each client. And that's really what Peter Drucker is talking about here. Quality is all about customer satisfaction. It's not about how much effort you put into the service or the product. So let's jump into the details around translation quality assessment. Just to recap, in 2015 we introduced a new feature into Studio, the translation quality assessment, and this allows a very configurable approach to addressing quality in the translation process, because we're providing a very flexible framework and set of tools that can be used to assess the quality of the translatable content. And this is done by integrating quality metrics and scoring that's related to the metrics, so that you can set up a framework that best matches the content you're dealing with. Overall, we call this TQA, Translation Quality Assessment. So if we simplify it, it's really down to three things here. It's a very functional approach to measuring quality in the translatable content, and by then having the result of a quality assessment that you can evaluate and correct any defects, over time this can improve the translation process, leading to less issues the next time around. So it's about defining the framework that you want to use in your particular context. It's very important to be able to customize the quality results that you want to report on and that you want to measure. And once you've done this upfront work, you can use this framework to evaluate the content and correct the defects. The idea being that you go from poor through fair and good to great quality over time. You then analyze the data and continually use this to improve the process so that over a period of time the quality of your translations become automatically improved. So you might ask, what have quality metrics got to do with measuring quality? Well, it's important to try and get to an objective place, and this is where metrics can really help to reach that point. They can help you to measure the translation in a concrete way so that you can use these results to help improve the translation process. So you have a very structured way to report issues and a structured way to fix the issues, all handled in a very non-emotional way. The metrics have been looked at by various organisations for a very long time, starting probably with the Lisa QA metric. This one's been defunct for a number of years now, but it's still used quite heavily, so we left this one within the application. Why is it defunct? Probably because other bodies have stepped in and provided more modern and functional quality frameworks. Two of them should be mentioned, or specifically mentioned: the multidimensional quality metrics and the TAOS dynamic quality framework. Both of these two bodies have been joining forces recently to come up with a more harmonized set of metrics. So let's have one standard and not be so fragmented around this topic, especially since there is a lot of overlap between the two. It is interesting how the industry is organizing itself at the moment to try and provide a single, consistent way of measuring the quality of translation work. But having said this, it is important to retain the ability to customize the process, so you can use other metrics such as the Translation Quality Metric Task Force SAE J2450, which I think is more related to the automotive industry. And you may wish to create your own quality framework based on anything you like. So flexibility is most important. So just one example from the automotive industry, which we put into our ebook. I will share some resources at the end of the presentation for further reading and viewing. And this is of course an ebook that SDL have created together with some of our LSP partners on the topic of quality assessment. But it is quite interesting to see how in the automotive industry, General Motors have been able to effectively reduce the number of translation errors, improve the translation turnaround time, and reduce the overall translation costs by implementing quite strictly the quality metric put forward by J2450. So another way to put this is, if you really want to know what is a quality translation, it's about combining the actual translation work with the TQA flow. So you collate the defects, you revise those, analyzing them to get your metrics, and you use all of this information to improve over time. At the bottom of the slide, we can see some examples of TQA categories, where you can make sure that grammar, spelling, punctuation and syntax have all been followed, but you also want to make sure that the company style guide that you might have has been adhered to, and that the company terminology has been adhered to, that you have the proper style for the intended audience. So they're trying to make the more subjective points that you would use to assess the quality, but in a more objective way. So it goes much further than the sort of things which we discussed already. It helps to answer questions: has the right information gone from the source to the target in the target language? Has the right style being used in an appropriate way for the intended audience? And these are the sort of questions that are answered by going through the TQA process. So can we use TQA model for anything? So I thought I'd just take a quick look at a model which has been used in the past for even evaluating the translation of poetry, for example. And here they take a model that's very much based on a more subjective approach, but in a measurable way, by splitting the quality model into covert errors and overt errors. And so there, rather than looking for spelling mistakes and meanings of words, a much more of an overview has to be taken to find out whether or not you've actually managed to get across the meaning. Translating poetry is a lot different to translating a scientific document, where really there's only one possible meaning, or a marketing document where there's probably only one way of translating into another language. Poetry is always going to be very subjective, so putting something like that to a quality model is going to be tricky, but it has been done. So let's just take a look at a quality metric profile in Studio. So this is an example of what it would look like, of what it might look like. you can see the new settings area within the project settings, and a series of categories that can be used to further define the metrics that you actually want to use. In this particular example, I think we're looking at TAOS DQF, but let's demo this in Studio just to give you a better idea of how this works. So let's take a look at this now. So we're into Studio, and first I go to File, Setup, Project Templates. And this is the area where you can import some project templates into the list of project templates that are going to be available for you when you're setting up your projects. You can even import or export the project settings of the TQA settings from these project templates and then import them into your own projects. So for example, I have TQA ELISA model, NQM model, SAE J2450, the TAOS DQF, and I have another one that I created down here just to measure some poetry. So if I was to open up the TAOS DQF, for example, and edit that, this gives me my categories, my severities, my scoring. These are the three things that you will see all the time while you're doing the quality assessment. You also have the profiles button. So in here, if I wanted to take the TQA settings and put them into another project, I could export those settings and save them wherever I like. The file will be SDL TQA settings, and then I can import those settings back into another project so that I have all these same categories, severities, scoring, document types, etc. Available for me elsewhere. Very important. So you can see if I just look at this quickly, I have a lot of categories in this one. In here, typical sort of things, sort of mistranslation, additional words where I've missed something or it's untranslated, grammar checkings, all sorts of things in here. If I compare this to something a little less complicated, like this one for example, you can see there's a lot less settings here. Still has the same severities, critical, major and minor, and the scoring based on each of those different types of severities. So this is completely flexible. You can edit any of these you like, and you can create a completely new one. So if I was, for example, to go into TQA House and edit this one, you can see this looks a little different, where I've just created rules for the overt and the covert methods of doing a translation. But again, they have severities, and again, they have scoring. So all very similar in the way they actually work. Something else I should show you here, just in case you first start Studio and you find that you only have the default settings. If you don't have any of these here, these first four are actually provided with Studio when you install them. And if you click on the import button, it should take you straight to the default folder for this, which is My Documents, Studio 2015, and then Project Templates. I've got a lot of templates in here, but you can see in here I also have these TQA models. And four of those, you won't get the TQA House because I just made that one up, but you will get the ELISA, NQM, SAE, J2450 and the TAOS DQF. So you could click on that, import it, and this will add it to your list. So we come back into Studio again. What I also wanted to show you was a different method of doing the TQA, using a product called Qualitivity, which is a plugin. It's a free plugin available to anybody who has a Studio license. This means that a freelance translator, or somebody just using the freelance license, could still use TQA in order to carry out a quality assessment of their own work if they wanted to. So the way this works is it's a plugin. It's downloadable from the Open Exchange, and in there you can see it's very similar to what we've just been looking at in Studio, in that you have a number of settings that you can get at. So let's take a look at that in Studio as well. So now that I'm in Studio, if I scroll down to the bottom, here's the Qualitivity plugin down here. It's all empty at the moment because I've got really nothing in there. But if I click on the application settings up here, down here I have a quality metrics button, and in here it's a little different from Studio in that here you permanently have at your fingertips access to all of the different settings that you can use at any time on any project, and you can just select them from a drop down when you're carrying out the work. Works in a similar way. It's completely configurable. You can export or import the actual settings if you like. The TAOS, SEE, MQM and Lisa all come with the product. I'm pretty sure Lisa does as well. I've added the house TQA as well. But it works the same way. You can export, import the settings, so you can make them available for your colleagues, or you can just make them available somewhere safe. So if you ever have to do a reinstall and you've lost everything, you can import them back in again. Very straightforward and simple to use. So to look at this in a bit more of an abstract way, you'll always find these elements. You'll find an overall categories, such as accuracy or fluency of the translation. You will find these subcategories, such as these, which I've mentioned before. So in terms of fluency, you might have grammar or spelling errors. And these show a different type of quality issue which hinder the fluency of being able to read the document. When we have severities, and these are mapped onto a scoring grid or penalty points. So in brief, this is the quality model in a very abstract way, but each model that we've looked at and each model that can be set up within Studio follows a very similar way of representing the quality assessment. So this is what it looks like in Studio. This is a screenshot of the built-in TQA model within Studio. Qualitativity is a little different in that the built-in model uses track changes and it's very well integrated into the Studio workflow. So every change that you make is recorded, and against every change you can record quality metrics. The qualitativity model doesn't use track changes in this way, although you can track and keep a record of all the quality metrics that are used in measuring the quality of the translation. But we'll look at that as well in a minute. So let's take this first of all and look at this and how it works in Studio. So let's go over to Studio and take a look. So I've got a little project here that has been translated, a combination of translation memory and machine translation already. And probably if you look down through here, you'll see that there are some errors in it. So I want to carry out my quality assessment. So the first thing is I've actually opened this in translation mode. It makes sense to probably do this in review mode. So I'm going to open it for review. You can immediately see you're in the right mode because it swaps by default. The translation memories, QA windows and things like this are at the bottom instead of at the top. And what I'm going to do is first of all go to my project settings and just make sure that I have a quality assessment model to use. And if I look in here, you can see I don't. So as I mentioned before, I can go to my profile and I can import the settings. So previously what I've done is in my 2015 folder, so my document Studio 2015, then project templates, I've exported all the different models already into a folder called SDL TQA settings. That's not there by default. I just created that and then exported them all so they were there available to me. So I'm going to take the TAOS DQF settings here, click on open, import them, and when I now look inside the categories, you can see I've now got all the categories, the severities, the scoring and the document types all available to me. So now that I'm ready to go, I'm going to click over on review, and under the track changes window, if I click on the drop down, I'm going to click on assess quality. So rather than just go through and track the changes that I'm going to make as I'm recording the quality, I'm going to use the assess quality mode to do this. So as I scroll down the document, probably the first 4 segments look, I'm sure that they're going to be okay. The 5th one looks as though it probably has a verb missing. So over here in the source, I have, excuse my pronunciation, Qualifizierte Personaleinsetzen, which will be the German, and the English equivalent is missing the verb at the beginning, probably because the German has put it at the end, and in English you wouldn't put it at the end. So I'm going to add in here the verb use, and you can see that as I'm typing this, the track changes is on in a slightly different format to which we're used to seeing. So it adds this highlighted white color at the back, so you can tell this is not ordinary track changes, this is quality track changes. then I'm just going to move down to the next segment. You can see it's also changed my confirmed segment to a translation rejected, which is what I want. And you'll notice that as I move into the next segment, I get a warning now asking me if I want to add details about the quality assessment item I just reported. I could say don't show the warning again, but I'll leave that there, and I'm going to click on OK. And when I do that, it brings up my window. So what I want to do now is tell it what kind of an error it is. Probably this is accuracy, probably it's an omission because I've missed out the verb. It's pretty critical really, so I'll leave it at critical. It's addition, so I might just type in here my comment that says the verb is missing, and then just click on OK. Well, before I do that, just to let you know something else I could do, this actually applies to, or I can apply this to the German word, so einsetzen. So I can click on einsetzen and apply selection, and you can see this marks up the source as well, so I actually know what this is applying to. Use einsetzen, so I can click on OK. And as I'm doing that, if I click on the TQA window down here, you can see that the actual things as I'm recording them are being recorded in this menu down the bottom. So let's move down a little bit further. Let's have a look. So segment 6 we're in here now. So this is a little bit of a strange translation. So qualified personnel are persons who are based on there. So we've used the verb are twice, which is a little bit odd. So probably we would delete one, take this one and delete it. And as I press the delete key, you can see it brings up the assessment item, and it's showing me what I've actually done. So what I'm doing here, this is probably a fluency issue. Or language grammar, in fact. Language grammar. It's major, it's a deletion, and I may just write verb put in twice. Click on OK. And then what I might do as well is just to correct that a bit further. Qualified persons are persons who, I'll add a comma in here, who, comma, based on their training, experience and instruction, comma, as well as the knowledge of relevant standards, regulations, accident prevention, regulations and operating conditions, who are, comma, probably authorized. And I can move down to the next segment. I get my warning again, I click on OK, and so I've added in a comma. So I've got probably again my language style, punctuation, minor, addition, comma missing, and then you can see down here I've actually made an extra change because I added another comma in there. So I can click on next, which takes me to the next comma where I've added something in there. In fact, it's taking me through them as I go through. Here we are, this is taking me to the last comma where I've added it in. It's just here, it's a bit hard to see. And this is probably, it's language grammar again, but it's minor, common, and I'm just going to say repetition of the comma. Click on OK. Now there's probably a lot more changes in here I could make as I work down here. Perhaps we'll just do one more. If I come down to section 13, down in section 13 we can see that the machine translation has left this unedited, so I want to change the name. Can't even say that one. Mangelnd, and this really should be lack of. And again I come down, and so this is accuracy was untranslated. It's fairly critical, I'd say. Or maybe a major replacement. So this is left untranslated, and click on OK. So that will do for now. What I could do then is I can close my document, And when I do this, I get a little chart. Ask me the normal things that I get in review mode. Do I want to complete the review? But the very nice thing is it shows me a chart of the number of errors and whether it's passed or failed. This is it's pretty bad. I've actually failed. I could overwrite it if I wanted to, so I could change it to a pass. I could say the document type, this is technical documentation. I could give it an evaluation comment, so maybe please do another round of translation review. And finish. That will complete my review for me, and then I can even look at a report on this. So if I go through to my batch tasks and look for translation quality assessment, when I run this and then go to my reports view, there's my translation quality assessment. If I move this window over a bit, you can see that better. And down here I have the report. It gives me an overall fail, which we knew already. It tells me the pass threshold limit, how many segments, words, characters there were in the document, and then it shows me the scoring that was used, so the metrics are actually used. Then it shows me the number of occurrences of each of the severities, followed by a tracking of every change I actually made in the document, so you can actually see what was applied. So you have a proper report here explaining exactly why the quality of that translation was not good enough, without any emotion or anything else involved, which is exactly what you need. So let's just take a very quick look at how this works in Qualitivity. An important thing to note in here is that you need to make sure that the activity tracking is set to start when a document is opened. So even though you're not going to be really that interested in doing the productivity side, although you might do, in order for the quality metrics to work, this has to be working and set up that way. So what I would do is I just open the file up, take the same file as before. So we open this up. I've just opened it in translation mode. First time you do it, you won't have the appropriate windows open to edit the quality management, so you need to click on the view menu, and over here you'll find two buttons, the quality metrics and the activity tracker. You don't need them both. You need the quality metrics, you don't necessarily need the activity tracker, but I'm going to click it on just so you can see what it looks like. Now this by default will probably come down here, and so what you'll need to do is when you've added it in is pick it up and put it somewhere else. I like it to be there because it's out of my way, and if I don't want to watch that, I can be on something else and I don't have to watch the time that you can see is ticking away. And you need the quality metrics. These also do not appear in there. These would also be down here somewhere, so you need to pick them up and put them where you want them. Whoops, reset window layout if you make a mistake like I just did. So I'll reset my window layout, puts everything back again, put that back in. You can see it's put it down there, look, that's where it goes, and I want it there, and I want my quality metrics, and these are going to be over here. There we go. So there's my quality metrics. So the way it works in Qualitivity is that it's a two-pass thing. So the first thing you're doing really is just identifying where all the problems are when it's being reviewed for somebody else to change, and it has a tracking mechanism for that. So there are two ways you can do it, but you can add them in here like this and add a new one, or you can do it the quick way using the quick insert, which is quite nice. So if I was to add this one again, we know that this should have the extra verb in here, use. But what you would do is you wouldn't add it in at this stage, not really. You'd select your text, and as you select it, the text that you've selected is added into the content box, and you'd add a comment here, missing verb. So you can see it's not quite as intuitive as the built-in version, which would actually track what you were doing for you and put this information in here. So it's a little bit more manual. You can add the type, so it was accuracy, omission. I think that's what we used before. Accuracy omission is pretty critical, so we'll say critical, and you click on add, and you can see the number up there moves on. But we haven't actually added it in here. We're just creating a report at this point, which identifies what's there for somebody to be able to go and correct. You could correct them as you're going along, but then you're not getting this tracking process. So we're going down here again, the bottom one, this one here. This is too many verbs. And so this one we said was style, I guess it was, we used. Or did we use something internal? We used style, I think. Style inconsistent major, and we add that. So you get the idea, you go through and you add them. When you've finished, if I close the file, so I'm not going to do them all right now, I click on OK. When I come back down to my qualitativity and look at the most recent one, which is this one here, if I click on the activity documents and then go to my document reports and then quality metrics over here, what you get, it's a little bit small to see on here I'm afraid, but what you get is a quality assessment report that has tracked all the different bits and things that you've written. It tells you which model you've used, TAOS DQF, whether it's passed or failed already. So it summarizes them up in a very similar way. And if you export the activities or create an activities report, you can get this report in HTML or in Excel to be able to use elsewhere. Now, when I said it was in two parts, this is because you open the file up again, and this time you want to go and edit it. So if you look at the container, you see you get these little flags. What you could do is, to make it easier, is you could drop this over down into the side here, so it's bigger and you can see it, and you can work through it. So if you've got a big list of these things, it's much easier to see in here than it would be if it was in this little window up here. And what you would do is, the green ones are unresolved, the blue ones are resolved. So the green one, I could say right click, I can edit that. Oh, that one's already resolved, sorry, I should have done the top one. So the blue ones are unresolved. Edit. Status is open, I can change that to resolved, and I would go and resolve it. So it's a separate operation. So it's tracking it for you, it's allowing you to do it, but what it's not doing is tracking it as you're doing it, in the same way the out-of-the-box Studio or Studio one does. So this is more of a review and fix process. So I can right click, that was the green, it was a right click, wasn't it? Edit. Yeah, so I'll close that one, resolved, or you could ignore it. And I'll take out that, put my comma in, and my comma in. So they were finished, all resolved. Close the file, and when I go back to my report, down here, oh, I need to pick the right one, sorry. Sure we got the right one, which is this one. There we go, let's see, that's changed. So now they're all resolved. It's now passed because they've been resolved. And it shows you what changes you've actually made, because it does a comparison. So although you didn't use track changes, it is recording the changes as you're going along. So you could do it as you're going along, and you'll see the changes later at the end of the day. So perhaps not quite as intuitive as the out-of-the-box does, but it does provide you a mechanism, and particularly when you get used to it, to be able to deal with this in an appropriate way using the freelance version of Studio. I'm going to give you a link at the end to a video just on this particular tool and how to use this for quality measurement like this, because this is a very quick example and it can be far easier than I've just made it look. Let's go back to the slide deck. I think we've seen how this works. So when we looked at Studio, we saw that we also have a new view part in here that tracks everything that the user's doing during the review. And you can see this by item in this view. And then when he's finished, he gets a report, or you get a report showing how many issues have been reported, whether they passed or failed. And finally, you have a summary of this statistical data that you can use to analyze the quality of your translations and see what you need to do to change the configuration or assess how you need to work in the future. So what can people get out of the report? You can see immediately that overall the translation is not acceptable, or it is. You can do an evaluation on the work of the translator, which is what we did in fact, because we had some information about verbs that were missing and the use of too many verbs and commas, that sort of thing. What's also interesting is you could use it to evaluate the reviewer to see whether they really had sufficient subject matter experience to be able to review the material that you're asking them to look at effectively. So as a project manager, this gives you the ability to add the review and the translation phase, or to look at the review and translation phase, not just one or the other. You could also use it to review machine translation engine, so you could come up with a framework specifically designed to test or assess the accuracy of translations from the machine translation engine and see if you could take advantage of the QA process there. So you could decide whether you wanted to use a particular machine translation engine for your project, or just assess the quality of a machine translation in a particular domain before you decided to use that within your workflow for all of the work that you do. And then obviously the end goal is to improve the process, to continually monitor and adapt and enhance your translation process. So TQA in a nutshell, you can customize the metrics that you want to use, and you would do that with a view to your customer requirements. So you could sit down with the customer, refine the standards, choose which ones you wanted to use. So an example I gave earlier, in the automotive industry, you might start with J2450 and then refine it. So you'd add parts and remove parts, or maybe just use it out of the box. You can record the defect classification and track small changes down to grammar mistakes, small word changes, changes in style, the way things are written, all at a very granular level. We can generate reports. These are automatically generated reports in a quantifiable way, and then it can be shared with your clients. You can see immediately whether the translation was acceptable, or whether or not it passed or failed with the threshold analysis. And you can then consolidate all of the revision data within the project. So basically what this means is that using Studio 2015, you have an integrated solution reducing cost, time and complexity. So now just very briefly, we'll go beyond using TQA in Studio. So you can see from this slide, SDL is also collaborating with TAOS, the Translation Automation User Society. So this gives companies the opportunity to share this data, the data that they're getting through their translation process online, and compare it with the quality and the productivity of other users. So there is a custom plugin on the SDL App Store that uses the TAOS framework, and you can go and get that separately. Actually, Qualitivity, which you can see at the bottom, which is useful for the freelance edition, this is also integrated with TAOS if you choose to do it. So what I showed you for the translation quality assessment doesn't require any integration with TAOS at all. You can do that without sharing information at all. But if you wanted to share the information with TAOS, you can do that using the Qualitivity plugin. And as I think we said on an earlier slide, you can also use translation quality assessment for assessing the quality of machine translation. Very useful for that sort of thing. So it's just an example of the sort of things that can be done using these sorts of features within these tools outside of the local use cases that we've considered so far. Then I've got a final slide, some recommended reading and viewing. So in here there's I think it's an ebook, Quality Matters. I go to that site, Quality Matters. There you can download the ebook, and this is a very interesting book explaining what quality is all about, improving the quality translations, a couple of videos you can watch, and a bit more information explaining what the quality challenge is. So that's worth a read. There's another ebook called The Pursuit of Perfection in Translation. If I go to that one. So this is another ebook. You can download this from Translation Zone. Ebook, The Pursuit of Perfection in Translation. Just need to fill a few details in there. Then there's a link to how to assess translation quality from the Common Sense Advisory. This unfortunately is not up to date on Studio 2015 capabilities, but still a very interesting document to read and to understand a little bit more about measuring translation or assessing translation quality. And we have the SDL YouTube channel, which I'm not going to go to, but there's all sorts of things you can do. You can go and look at there, including some videos on how to use the quality tools in Studio. And finally, I mentioned earlier that you'll find a better video on how to use the Qualitivity plugin for your quality management. So there's a link there to my blog, and in there you'll find an article on Qualitivity. And if you scroll down a bit, because it does an awful lot, that plugin, but if you scroll down, the third one, this video is all about quality metrics, so how to set it up, how to use it in a lot more detail, and making it look a lot better than I actually managed to do while I did this presentation today. And that's about it. So maybe just to summarize, translation quality assessment in Studio. It's a new feature that supports the quality thing we have at the moment in all the things that we're doing within SDL Trados Studio and Group Share 2015. You can combine this with many of the automated quality control checks that you would do while you're carrying out the translation work itself, so quality checks. So that overall we can provide a much more holistic quality assurance orientated process. It helps to make the assessing and measuring of translation quality less subjective and much more objective, which is what's required if you want to be able to have a meaningful conversation with your client or the work giver over their views on whether or not you've met the quality of the translation work itself, or even if you're just trying to identify why you have to make so many changes to things because you're translating, for example, a lot of machine translation that they're giving you. Lots of things like that. So the out-of-the-box supports all the current frameworks, or the common ones, which we looked at, which was the TAOS DQF, the MQM model, the LISA QA model, and the SAE J2450. But it can be freely customized to suit your individual needs as well. You might just want to have something that's as simple as pass-fail, and just two options, and that's it. And then finally, you can extend it by using third-party applications, which we've seen with Qualitivity. And that's about it. Unfortunately, I'm not there to take any questions, but if you do have any questions and they don't get answered, then please pass them on to Svetlana, I guess, and I'm sure she will be able to ensure that I get the questions and can feed any answers that I'm able to give back into you. But if you're still with me, thank you very much for listening. And once again, I do apologize for having to provide the presentation in this way. It's not the best. I have to say I've not enjoyed trying to deliver it through a laptop like this, especially under the time frames that I've had to do this. And it would have been much more enjoyable for everybody, I think, if we could have done it face to face. But nonetheless, I hope it was useful, and I hope it's shown you something that maybe you didn't know before, and that you might be able to take advantage of in the future. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.